And for more insight, let's speak with Hussein Banai, Associate Professor of International Studies at the Hamilton Lugar School of Global International Studies in Indiana University and Bloomington. So, Professor, thanks for your time today. Just want to pick up the point on Gulf allies appearing to have actually helped to pull the U.S. president back from military action in Iran. Do you see this as a fundamental shift in terms of the region's security dynamics that, is now prioritizing stability, especially as Tehran has been viewed as a destabilizing force?
Yeah, I don't think it's a major shift. It is actually very normal for Arab countries in the region to usually um, uh, prescribe measures that they think will bring about stability immediately, given that this region is one of the major hubs for the transfer of energy to the rest of the world. So they're acutely aware that if a war were to break out, it could very quickly spread to the Persian Gulf. That could affect the transfer of oil tankers through the Straits of Hormuz, and that could really affect the global oil trade. But on top of that, they also have seen Iran really throw its weight around through its networks of Shia proxies mostly. And they fear that it might destabilize their countries if a war were to break out, and Iran would have no other choice but to attack U.S. allies in the region.
Professor, go a little deeper on the energy story because, like you've mentioned, Iran controls key oil reserves, also the Strait of Hormuz. So how actually then could deepening unrest there shake global energy markets even more than, say, the crisis in Venezuela?
Well, the prices would shoot up immediately because there will be uncertainty about inventory levels, about the access to oil, and the safe transfer of those oil tankers to their destination. So, at a just basic logistical level, you can see there would be uncertainty around it, and uncertainty usually rattles markets to increase prices, and those effects will be felt at the gas pump across the world. And I think that's one of the considerations for President Trump, frankly, more than anything else, given that the economic picture in the United States is somewhat uncertain right now. This having happened only a week after the extraction of Maduro in Venezuela, that there will be some blowback at the gas pump, and American voters are already weary of the economic picture in the United States. So I don't imagine that the Gulf leaders had that much trouble persuading the president on this.
Yeah, Professor, at the same time, the U.S. Treasury has slapped new sanctions on Iran. The EU G7, they have threatened further sanctions as well. I mean, given that Iran is already under heavy sanctions, I mean, do these measures meaningfully increase leverage over the regime, especially if Tehran is going to feel that there's nothing else to lose economically?
No, they don't. I think they're largely symbolic. Sanctions have really become a shortcut to having been seen that you're doing something when there's no really good military option available. And so I think the Americans and the Europeans, the West as a whole, wants to signal that they disapprove of what's happening inside Iran by, once again sanctioning. I mean, you mentioned Ali Larijani, the former Speaker of Iranian Parliament, getting under sanctions. I mean, he's been under sanctions for much of the past 20 years. So it is largely a symbolic move. It's not going to have that much of an impact. When it comes to the movement of money out of Iranian banks, I think the fact that the U.S. Treasury Secretary is openly giving figures of the amounts being moved is largely a signal to the Iranian leaders that they are watching the transfer of money, that they have enough live feedbacks out of Iran that they can see who's rattled, who's not, but also to send a strong signal to the top leadership and say, look, people below you are rattled enough that they're starting to move money out. So some Iranian leaders might not even know that their underlings are already planning a future after the regime.
And Professor, about the Iranians who've been protesting and what they really want and whether their voices are heard, we know that internet blackouts continue. There are efforts to jam Starlink. How critical is open access to digital communications in sustaining their protest movement? And could satellite internet then be a key player in Mr. Trump's strategy to pressure Tehran?
It absolutely is. To answer your second question first, look, access to the internet and telecommunications technologies today is just about the most important way for people's voices to be heard, for what's happening on the streets to be seen. If especially a country is in the midst of a massacre, let's say by regime forces, um, if there is no access to technology, the news of that massacre can come out well after protests have died out. Whereas if it comes out simultaneously, as it did during the first week and a half of the protests, the international community can organize much faster. And ordinary Iranians can get the opposition in the diaspora to really lobby foreign governments that much easier. I noticed this effect firsthand when the internet went black. All of a sudden, Iranians in the diaspora didn't have enough good information with which to lobby their respective home governments outside of Iran. And so that really created the conditions for the government to crack down. And as the number you mentioned, which some people estimate is at least twice or three times that the actual number of dead people indicates, they seem to have had an effect in quelching the protests for now.
Yeah, and Professor, the UN Security Council has scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss the deadly protests, and this is at the request of the US. What is the practical impact this meeting going to have?
No practical impact necessarily, but it's yet another important data point to demonstrate that the world community as a whole is condemning Iranian government's actions. The UN Security Council does have two permanent votes that are traditionally allied with Iran, that of Russia and China. So by bringing it to that forum, it also puts the pressure on those two countries to go on the record and condemn Iran. And that data point then later on can be used as a diplomatic reference point if the killings were to be picked up again, let's say, if there are more protests down the road, to sort of say, well, Iran has racked up enough that justifies a kind of a coalition-like intervention into the country. Now, that I'm not saying that's going to happen, but those data points tend to add up. Beyond that, I don't see much more of a practical impact that will have on the ground. Iranian leaders openly taunt the United Nations and international bodies, saying that they become a tool of Western powers, and they don't take those condemnations necessarily seriously.
All right, appreciate your time today. Hussein Banai, the Associate Professor of International Studies at the University of Indiana at Bloomington.